The taste of consequences. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below, because after this one, you'll never look at food the same way again. It was 3:47 a.m. when the police finally caught up to Vincent V. Moretti, a name whispered in backroom gambling rings and shadowy docks from New York to Naples. He wasn't your average street hustler. V was meticulous, a man who built empires with silence and calculated fear. For years, he'd managed to avoid prison through slick lawyers and dirty money. But that night, the illusion crumbled like stale bread. The chase ended in a narrow alley behind a rundown bakery. Ironically fitting, the smell of bread was the last thing he'd breathe as a free man. He surrendered quietly, his hands lifted in the pale glow of the police floodlights. The press had a field day the next morning. Mafia financier caught after decade on the run. But this wasn't the end of V's story. It was the beginning of something darker, a transformation that would turn him from a feared crime boss into an unlikely prison legend. At Rikers Island, V learned that power meant nothing behind concrete and steel. His suits were replaced by a jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and despair. His meals, the real punishment, arrived on gray trays, cold beans, mystery meat, and cornbread so dry it could scrape your throat. The first week broke most inmates. For V, it was just another game, a new economy to master. He started small, trading packets of instant coffee for favors, cigarettes for respect. But what fascinated him most wasn't the violence or hierarchy, it was the food. He noticed how each inmate's meal told a story. Some trays had extras, an apple here, a pudding cup there, subtle signs of who had influence. Others were stripped bare, like the souls of those who'd been forgotten. On the 10th day, he met Marcus Chef Delroy, a former Michelin-trained cook who'd fallen from grace after a drunk-driving manslaughter conviction. Chef had turned the prison kitchen into a black market empire. With access to supplies, he controlled comfort, the one currency more powerful than contraband, decent food. Chef saw something in V, that old spark of organization, the businessman's mind. You want to survive here, Moretti? You don't fight. You feed. From that day on, the two struck an unspoken alliance. V handled the strategy, Chef handled the supply. Together, they built an underground food network, sneaking ingredients from commissary, reallocating kitchen stock, and cooking in secret during night shifts. Word spread fast. The elites of Rikers, corrupt guards, gang shot callers, and even white-collar criminals, began paying in cigarettes, favors, and protection for a taste of real food. Pasta cooked al dente, tomato sauce made from smuggled ketchup and chili flakes, grilled sardines from the commissary's dusty cans, all served behind closed doors like forbidden luxury. For a moment, the food felt like freedom. But freedom comes with a price. It wasn't long before whispers reached the wrong ears. A jealous inmate ratted them out after being cut from the menu. The next morning, a random search turned up contraband in the kitchen, spices, utensils, and even a portable burner hidden behind a false panel. Chef was dragged out in handcuffs. V stood by the bars of his cell, watching silently as guards beat Chef to the ground. The man who turned scraps into miracles was gone within minutes, transferred to solitary confinement. That night, the entire prison went silent. Dinner was served as usual, gray mush on a metal tray. But something was different. The kitchen smelled faintly of smoke, and the guards were nervous. V noticed everything. The way they avoided his eyes, the way the lights flickered as if something unseen stirred beneath the calm. Later, as V scraped his tray clean, he found a folded note underneath, a small, greasy scrap of paper. Written in jagged letters, it said, "They're not feeding us the same anymore. Check the kitchen waste. Something's wrong." The message sent a chill through his chest. For the first time since his arrest, V wasn't just surviving. He was afraid. When morning came, he convinced a friendly guard to let him into kitchen duty. The floor was sticky, the smell unbearable. He dug through the waste bins and saw something that made his stomach turn. Half-burned meat, gray and sinewy, but too strange in shape and color to be pork or beef. He stepped back, heart pounding. He'd seen enough in his old world to recognize danger when it stared him in the face. Whatever was happening in that kitchen wasn't just about food. It was about control, and maybe something much worse. That night, he wrote a coded message to one of his outside contacts. He needed information, the kind that only money and loyalty could buy. Hours later, as the lights dimmed and the cell block went quiet, V lay awake, thinking about Chef, about the food, about the note. And then he heard it, faint, metallic, scraping from the kitchen below. The guards ignored it. The inmates whispered. And somewhere in the dark, someone laughed, low, rasping, and familiar. They said Chef was gone, V murmured under his breath. Then who's cooking now? The feast in the dark. The following morning, Rikers Island felt different, quieter, heavier, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. Breakfast trays came late. The usual clatter of metal doors and shouting guards was replaced by whispers and nervous laughter that didn't reach the eyes. Vincent Moretti sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the tray that had just been slid through the bars. Scrambled eggs, if you could call them that, rubbery, pale, and cold. But beneath the smell of disinfectant and burnt oil, something lingered. A strange, coppery scent, faint but unmistakable. He pushed the tray aside. Not today, he muttered. By noon, rumors began to swirl. 2 inmates from Block C had been transferred out for medical reasons. One guard said they'd been vomiting blood. Another said their skin had turned gray. Chef's note echoed in V's mind. They're not feeding us the same anymore. He needed answers. And in Rikers, answers didn't come cheap. That night, when the lights dimmed and the guards retreated to their stations, V made his move. He'd spent years learning how to navigate closed systems, banks, cartels, city politics. Prison wasn't any different. You find the weak link, the man with too much to lose, and you pull. His weak link was Officer Raymond Dill, a low-level guard with a gambling problem and a sick kid at home. V had been watching him for weeks. When Dill passed by his cell during rounds, V slipped him a folded commissary receipt with a note inside. I can make your debts disappear, but I need 5 minutes in the kitchen. The next day, at 2:15 a.m., the door to the kitchen storage quietly creaked open. Dill's flashlight beam trembled as he whispered, 5 minutes, Moretti. If we get caught, I'm done. V nodded and slipped inside. The kitchen was colder than he expected. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh white shadows over rows of industrial freezers and bins of powdered potatoes. The smell hit him immediately. Not just rot, but something acidic, chemical. He began searching through the waste containers again. Same strange meat scraps. Same greasy stains. Then he noticed something new. Crates marked with a supplier's logo he didn't recognize. Nutripak's Correctional Supply Company. He'd been in enough businesses to know the smell of a front company. When he pried open one of the crates, he found sealed vacuum bags of meat substitute, labeled high-protein soy blend. But the contents weren't soy. The texture was too fibrous. The color too real. A low groan echoed from the freezer room. Dill froze. What was that? V's pulse quickened. Stay here. He approached the sound, slow, cautious, until he saw movement through the frosted glass. Someone was inside the freezer. He yanked the door open, and his breath caught. Chef was there. Alive. Barely. He was sitting on a crate, shivering, his hands trembling as he chewed on something, a piece of raw meat. His eyes, once calm and sharp, were wide, glazed, almost feral. Chef, V whispered. Chef turned his head slowly, blood staining his lips. They made me taste it, he said. Said if I didn't, they'd feed it to everyone. Feed what? Chef pointed weakly to the bags stacked against the wall. It's not soy, V. It's not animal. It's us. V's stomach turned. What do you mean? They're disposing of the bodies, the ones who transfer out. They don't leave the island. They're processed, recycled, sold back to the system. The words hung in the air like poison. Before V could respond, the door slammed shut behind him. Dill screamed. Through the glass, V saw shadows moving. 2 guards in riot gear, faces hidden. They dragged Dill away as he fought and kicked. Then silence. V turned back to Chef, who was shaking uncontrollably. We have to go, V hissed. Chef nodded weakly, But as they pushed on the freezer door, it didn't budge. The lock had been engaged from the outside. They were trapped. Minutes passed. Then an intercom crackled to life above them. A calm, male voice spoke. "Mr. Moretti, you always had an appetite for control. Now you'll see what it really tastes like." The light flickered. The temperature dropped. V pounded on the door, but no one came. The hum of the refrigeration units grew louder, almost mechanical, like breathing. Then one by one, the bags on the shelves began to thaw, dripping red water onto the floor. Chef collapsed, his body convulsing from the cold. "You have to finish it," he muttered. "Expose them. Don't let them turn us into product." V crouched beside him, gripping his shoulders. "I'll find a way. I promise." When the guards finally opened the freezer hours later, Chef was gone, and so was one of the crates. V had vanished into the labyrinth of maintenance tunnels beneath the prison, dragging the truth with him. By morning, Rikers Island was in chaos. The warden announced an emergency lockdown after reports of structural failure in the kitchen wing. The inmates whispered about a ghost in the tunnels, a man who escaped death by eating the system from the inside. But outside the walls, something else stirred. A file appeared in a journalist's inbox in Manhattan. It contained supplier invoices, fake signatures, and photos from inside Rikers, showing bags of soy protein next to missing inmate reports. The sender's name was untraceable. At the bottom, one message: "They feed us lies. Now it's your turn to taste the truth." The media went wild. The city demanded answers. And in the chaos, one question lingered, whispered among guards and prisoners alike. If V had escaped, what was he eating to stay alive? Chapter 3: The Last Bite. When the lockdown finally lifted 2 weeks later, Rikers Island was a fortress under siege. Media helicopters circled the sky. Federal agents swarmed the gates. Every inmate was questioned, every cell searched. But Vincent V. Moretti was gone, vanished into the steel ribs of the island itself. The warden, red-eyed and sweating, told the press that V had likely drowned during the escape attempt. But deep down, no one believed it. Not after the file leak. Not after the news broke that Nutrapak's correctional supply company didn't exist anywhere in government records. It was as if the company, and the people behind it, had evaporated into thin air. Inside the prison, the cafeteria shut down completely. Food deliveries were seized, kitchen staff reassigned. The remaining inmates were put on emergency rations, bread and water mostly. And still, the whispers grew louder. "He's still here. He's watching. They say he leaves notes in the vents." At first, the guards laughed it off, until Officer Dill's body washed up near the East River, bloated, pale, with the word appetite carved faintly into his uniform tag. The feds took over after that. Agent Lisa Carter, a federal investigator with a reputation for breaking organized food fraud cases, was assigned to lead the probe. She'd seen corruption, smuggling, and embezzlement, but this was different. The leaked documents painted a picture of systemic rot. Fake food contracts, falsified death certificates, millions funneled through shell companies. And at the center of it all, one missing inmate. Carter arrived at Rikers under heavy guard. The air smelled like bleach and old metal. She toured the kitchen first, where stainless steel counters gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. "This is where it started?" she asked. A nervous deputy nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Freezer number 3. She stepped inside, her breath frosting. The hum of the refrigeration unit echoed like a heartbeat. Against the far wall, she saw something faintly scratched into the steel, almost invisible under the frost. "We eat what we are." Her radio crackled before she could respond. "Agent Carter, you might want to see this. We found something in the tunnels." The maintenance tunnels beneath Rikers were a maze, narrow, dim, reeking of damp concrete and rust. Carter followed the flashlight beams until she reached a small chamber near the boiler room. There, lying against the wall, was a stack of empty Nutrapak's crates. And above them, pinned to the wall with a prison fork, was a plastic ID badge. It was Chef's. On the back, written in black ink, were coordinates, not of Rikers, but of a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Carter's team raided it at dawn. The warehouse was cold, silent, and seemingly abandoned. Dust-covered pallets lined the floor. A generator hummed faintly in the distance. And then, in the center of the room, they found a metal table. On it, laid neatly side by side, were 6 sealed vacuum bags labeled high-protein correctional meal. One had been cut open. The contents looked like ground meat. But the DNA results would later confirm it wasn't from any animal. It was human. The discovery ignited a nationwide scandal. Senators called it the Rikers cannibal supply chain. Protests erupted across the country. The public demanded justice. And yet, Vincent Moretti's body was never found. Weeks later, in an upscale Manhattan restaurant known for its experimental cuisine, a new private dinner club began operating quietly under invitation only. The name of the chef? Unknown. But the dishes were said to be unlike anything anyone had ever tasted. So real, so intense, that guests often wept halfway through the meal. A journalist from the New York Sentinel attended one of these dinners under a false name. He described the chef as a man with sharp eyes and a soft voice, someone who moved like he'd seen too much. At the end of the meal, the chef leaned in and said almost kindly, "Every system eats its own. I'm just the waiter." The journalist never published his story. Days later, he disappeared. His apartment was found empty, except for a note taped to the refrigerator. Could you survive on this diet? The story spread online like wildfire, forums, podcasts, conspiracy channels. Some said V was alive, serving meals to the elite. Others claimed he was killed by the same corporations he exposed. But for those who'd been inside Rikers during the lockdown, one image stayed with them. The cafeteria's CCTV footage from the night V disappeared. In the final frame before the feed cut to static, a figure could be seen walking down the tunnel, dragging a crate behind him. The timestamp glitched, looping endlessly between 2:15 a.m. and 2:16 a.m. The guards who reviewed the footage said they could hear something faint beneath the hum of static, a voice whispering through the distortion. Bon appetit. Months passed. Rikers Island was eventually shut down for structural renovation. NutriPak's contracts were dissolved, and all related files disappeared into sealed federal archives. But whispers remained. Inmates transferred to other prisons began reporting strange food shipments. Unmarked boxes with that same faded logo. The same smell. The same metallic aftertaste. And somewhere deep in the underbelly of the system, someone was still cooking. If you listened close enough, under the fluorescent hum of every prison kitchen, you could almost hear it, the scrape of knives, the clatter of trays, and the quiet voice of a man who once ruled the streets, now ruling something darker. He'd survived the diet. He'd become it. If you thought this story was dark, you haven't seen anything yet. Subscribe before the next meal is served.